Hey guys, Mr. Yisley here. So we're on to lesson number 6 in chapter 8, all about graphing quadratic functions. And lesson number 6 is talking specifically about finding the axis of symmetry and the vertex of quadratic function. So just as a reminder, right, our axis of symmetry is that line that kind of splits our parabola in half. So if we were looking at just a little diagram of that, and let's just say it was an upward facing parabola, we've talked about that this vertex kind of splits right through the middle of our parabola. It's either the maximum or minimum. As we just talked about, in a upward facing parabola would be the minimum, but the axis of symmetry is the one that splits it right down the middle and makes the two sides mirror images. And so when we're talking about finding the axis of symmetry, we're talking about what is that line. We're also going to talk about how to find the vertex of a quadratic function, and we're going to talk about these specific to when you're doing it without graphing. So how do you figure these two pieces of information out without graphing them? So let's start first with the axis of symmetry. Right? So how do we find the axis of symmetry of a quadratic function without graphing? Well, to be honest, it's really just a formula that we use. And that formula is right here, which is x equals negative b over 2a. So x equals negative b over 2a. That's what we're going to use. And so that's something that you're going to want to get memorized as you go, but the more you use it, the easier it is. And we simply plug in the information for b and for a, and then we solve it for the x. Now, you may be saying, well, we haven't really dealt with b's. Where do we get b's from? Well, when we're doing this, we're talking about functions that are in this very specific form. F of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, again, as we've talked about, a, b, and c are just fillers. There'll be numbers in those spots. Right? And it could be negatives involved as well in all of that. But all we're talking about is recognizing that this is the formula we use. What's found in the B spot will go on top, including the sign in front. And what's found in the A spot will go down here at the bottom, including the sign in front. But it always starts with that negative out in front. And so that's how we find the axis of symmetry. We use that formula, we plug in the information looking at the function that they gave us, and we solve it for x, and whatever x equals is your axis of symmetry. All right, so let's talk a little bit about finding the vertex of a quadratic function without graphing. All right, the first thing you got to know is that the x-coordinate is the axis of symmetry. So whatever the x-coordinate is, that's the axis of symmetry that we have there. All right, so before we've dealt with only vertexes with x-coordinates of 0, which could still be the case, right? But most likely in what we're moving forward with, it's not going to be 0 anymore, so we're going to have to find that axis of symmetry. Second thing we've got to do is we've got to find the y-coordinate, all right? And we do this by substituting. All right, so we're going to find the y-coordinate through substitution, and we're going to substitute in the x-coordinate back into the original quadratic function, and we're going to solve it. All right, so we're going to substitute that x-coordinate that we just figured out from the axis of symmetry, and we're going to plug that back into the original quadratic equation for the x, and we're going to solve for the remaining value. So it's kind of like what we've been doing. We've been taking x values, inputting them into the quadratic functions, and then solving for the y values, or the f of x values, or g of x, or whatever it's listed as. Right? Once we've solved it and we've gotten that value, we now have our ordered pair. We have both an x and a y, and so that becomes our answer. The x and y coordinates that we figured out, we make them into ordered pair, and then that is our vertex. All right, so those are the processes that we're going to be going through. We'll see this more in depth in lesson number 7, putting this to use, but that's the process. So if you have any additional questions at this time, please let me know.